Hello, I'm John Bryant. I'm a professor at the University of Exeter in Devon.
And John, can you tell us what impact are humans having on the planet today, and how has that changed? How is that different today to how it has been in the past?
It's almost impossible to describe the extent of the impact they're having on the planet, but we can see extensive pollution, we can see environmental degradation, we can see overuse of resources, very, very dramatic in terms of, for example, fisheries and rainforest and even oil supplies. And many of human activities now leading to the worst problem of all, which is global climate change. Now, how that's changed over the centuries has very much depended on the population of the world, which is increasing very fast, and our technological abilities, that we are very, very much more sophisticated than, for example, our ancestors were 1,000 years ago. If we combine population pressures and the ability to do things with the Earth, then those have created, I think, the current situation. And it's getting worse.
And what are going to be the consequences of maybe climate change or some of the other things that you've named?
Well, I think if we look at, firstly, we look at overexploitation of resources. If we look particularly at fisheries, for example, we will see that what was a good food source for many, many people is now declining so fast that there are some coastal areas where the fishing industry has almost gone and fish have become an expensive luxury. There used to be a very good, cheap source of protein. Or if we look at the rainforest, the loss of rainforest has not only caused the destruction of the resource, but also has changed the climate in those areas. So rainfall patterns have changed, erosion has changed, and so on. But if we look at global warming, which is going to be the worst of all, what's happening with global warming is our use of resources that have lain dormant for millions of years as fossils. It's now releasing into the atmosphere carbon dioxide that had been locked up for all those millions of years. And the atmosphere just cannot absorb all that carbon dioxide. And so it's there, and it's trapping the heat from the sun, and slowly but surely increasing the temperature of the Earth. Now, that may not seem to be a very serious matter, but when we consider the balance between the tropics at one end and the poles at the other, that the balance that we currently live with is something that the human species has evolved to deal with, and our society depends on the current balance of climate. If it changes, we're in trouble. If the Arctic and the Antarctic ice melts, the sea levels will go up dramatically, for example. If the climate gets too warm, then we'll see more dry areas, and we'll see a push out of areas where crops can't grow. So we're going to see loss of habitat for wildlife, loss of farmland for ourselves, and loss of actual land to live on. All these are very, very serious.
How quickly could these serious consequences come about? Because some people are saying, well, nature does change, things go in cycles, and humans have always had an impact. But is it the case that it's escalating?
Well, I think both things you said are true. That firstly, there are cycles, natural cycles. We've seen the glaciations, the ice ages, caused by changes in the Earth's axis, caused by changes in the heat that comes out of the sun. All these happen on cycles, and it's also true to say that humans have always had an impact on the environment, but we're doing it so fast, we're changing the environment so fast that the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is overriding the natural cycles. So, for example, many scientists predicted we'll be creeping into a mini ice age sometime in the 21st century. But what's happening instead is that the carbon dioxide is pushing the temperature up, and so it is going to be very dramatic, and it's happening very, very fast, faster than living organisms can adapt, faster than big animals can migrate, for example.
And what can people do to try and rein that in?
It's going to take a communal effort across the world. I think we've got to realise that we are one species. We've got to work together, but we can reduce very dramatically the amount of fossil fuel we use by things like tunnels, by things like alternative energy sources, renewable energy sources, by every single person and every single industry, every single institution looking at what they're doing with power generation, with the use of power, and saying we can cut down on this. I mean, in Britain, we only generate about 2% of the carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere. But if every country acted as our government is now asking us to act, then we would certainly be able to reduce the inputs into the atmosphere very dramatically. In the same way as Al Gore, for example, in his film, The Inconvenient Truth, he pointed out that we can do it. And if we can do it, what we'll see is that there'll be a little bit of a further increase in carbon dioxide, and then it'll come down, and it'll come down to levels where the climate change will be much less dramatic. So that we will be able to cope, and the Earth will survive in the form as we understand it now.
And finally, as a scientist in the area that you work in, what would you say is something that you've seen with your own eyes that you think is either encouraging or worrying in terms of kind of
well, I think two things really. I think firstly, my work and the work of many colleagues, hundreds and thousands of colleagues on plant genetics, is leading to the development of crops that can be grown more sustainably in terms of not putting so much agricultural pollution onto the land, also crops that will be able to survive the slightly more dramatic conditions that they're facing. So we're seeing crops that are better for the land and will be able to survive better. I think in terms of my general biological knowledge, I've seen the movement north, for example in Europe, of species that were once confined to southern and central Europe, and they're moving north. We see bird species in Britain regularly now that were real rarities 30 years ago. We see insects moving north. Many species of insects have moved into Britain that weren't here before. So we do see symptoms of what's happening. But there are encouraging signs too. People are beginning to take notice.